The boarding gate at JFK Terminal 7 hummed with the usual pre-departure energy. Travelers lined up in clusters, some impatient, checking watches and phones, others resigned to the familiar rhythm of modern air travel. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, a Boeing 787-9 sat gleaming on the tarmac, engines silent, cargo holds being loaded with methodical precision. Dr. Amara Chen stood near the back of the business-class boarding line, her carry-on bag resting beside her feet. She wore dark jeans, a charcoal cashmere sweater, and white sneakers, comfortable, unremarkable, the uniform of a seasoned traveler who valued function over fashion. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no jewelry except a practical watch. Nothing about her appearance suggested wealth or authority. She was reading something on her phone, occasionally glancing up to monitor the line's progress. The document on her screen was a maintenance report for aircraft registration N847HG, the specific 787 she was about to board. Oil pressure readings from the previous flight, tire wear measurements, hydraulic fluid levels. Everything was within normal parameters. She scrolled through crew assignment records next. Captain Raymond Foster, 20 years with Skybridge, excellent safety record. First Officer Marcus Webb, competent, no incidents. Senior Lead Flight Attendant, Caroline Whitmore. Amara, scrolling, paused. She tapped the name, pulling up a separate file her assistant had compiled. 17 complaints in 5 years. 12 involved passengers of color, all dismissed by HR. Union protection, management avoidance. She closed the file, noted the information, returned to the present moment. The line moved forward. Amara picked up her bag and advanced with the flow. She'd built a career on information, on seeing what others missed or chose not to see, on understanding systems, mechanical, corporate, human. She'd founded Horizon Global Aviation 12 years ago with a single patent for lightweight composite materials that reduced aircraft weight by 7%. That patent had generated enough licensing revenue to begin acquiring distressed aviation assets during the industry downturn. Now, her company owned 43 aircraft leased to various carriers. She traveled frequently, inspecting her investments, assessing operational standards, maintaining direct knowledge of how her assets were being treated. She'd learned long ago that executive reports told you what people wanted you to know. Ground-level observation told you the truth. The gate agent scanned Amara's boarding pass. "Seat 3A, Dr. Chen. Enjoy your flight." "Thank you." She walked down the jet bridge, the familiar smell of recycled air and industrial cleaning products greeting her. The aircraft door stood open. 2 flight attendants flanked the entrance, offering practiced smiles. "Welcome aboard," said the younger one, a woman in her mid-20s with J. Torres on her name badge. Amara nodded and continued into the cabin. Business class was configured in a 1-2-1 layout, all direct aisle access seats. Amara's seat, 3A, was a window on the left side, just behind the bulkhead. She stowed her bag in the overhead compartment, settled into her seat, and removed her laptop from her personal item. The cabin filled gradually. Well-dressed professionals, most of them white, most of them comfortable with the privileges of business class travel. Amara observed them peripherally while opening the same maintenance file she'd been reading earlier. Old habits. She liked to know the mechanical state of anything she was entrusting with her life. "Excuse me," a man's voice, pitched to carry authority. Amara looked up. A white man in his 50s stood in the aisle beside row 3, looking annoyed. He wore an expensive but poorly fitted suit. His face was flushed, his body language aggressive. "Can I help you?" Amara kept her voice neutral. "That's my seat," he said, pointing at 3A. Amara glanced at her boarding pass, still tucked into her laptop case. "I believe this is seat 3A. That's what my boarding pass indicates." "I'm a Platinum Executive member," the man said, as if this explained everything. I was supposed to be upgraded. I see. Amara returned her attention to her laptop. You'll need to speak with the crew about your seating assignment. The man didn't move. Look, I don't know how you got that seat, but I fly this route every week. I always sit in business class. I'm sure we can work something out. Amara met his eyes. Sir, I purchased this seat. It's assigned to me. If there's a problem with your reservation, the crew can help you. I doubt you paid full price for that ticket, the man muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Amara felt the familiar weight of the statement, the assumption, the implication. She'd encountered it 1,000 times in 1,000 contexts, in boardrooms, at conferences, in restaurants, hotels, airports. The assumption that her presence in a space of privilege must be an error, a charity, an exception. She said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only dignified response. The man walked toward the galley, his frustration visible in his stride. Amara returned to her maintenance file. The aircraft's left engine had been serviced 8 days ago. New fuel nozzles, everything properly documented. She made a mental note to compliment the maintenance team. Excuse me, ma'am, a new voice, female, crisp, carrying the authority of uniform and seniority. Amara looked up again. A flight attendant stood in the aisle, mid to late 30s, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, 4 gold stripes on her sleeves, a name badge reading C. Whitmore, Senior Lead. Her expression was professional but cold, her posture rigid. Yes, Amara said. You need to see your boarding pass, please. Amara reached into her laptop case and handed over the boarding pass without comment. Caroline Whitmore examined it with exaggerated thoroughness, holding it up to the overhead light, checking the seat number multiple times. Dr. Chen, she read aloud, making the title sound faintly skeptical. That's correct. How did you obtain this ticket? The question landed with the weight of accusation. Amara kept her expression neutral. I purchased it through Skybridge's website, same as any passenger. I see, Caroline's tone suggested she didn't see at all. And you paid full price? I don't believe that's relevant, but yes. Caroline handed back the boarding pass, but she didn't leave. Instead, she glanced toward the galley, where the man from earlier, Gerald Hammond, Amara would later learn, stood watching with obvious satisfaction. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to gather your belongings and move to economy. The words hung in the air. Around them, other passengers were still boarding, conversations continuing, overhead compartments slamming shut. But in the small bubble around row 3, everything had gone still. Amara looked at Caroline Whitmore carefully, noted the set of her jaw, the certainty in her eyes, the absolute conviction that she was in the right. I'm sorry, Amara said calmly, but I don't understand. I have a valid boarding pass for this seat. What is the issue? There's been a seating error. We need this seat for Mr. Hammond. He's a platinum executive member. And I have a confirmed reservation. These tickets are often obtained through questionable means, Caroline said, lowering her voice as if this made the statement less offensive. We have the right to verify legitimate ticketing. Amara felt something settle in her chest. Not anger, not yet, just a cold, clear recognition of what was happening. I'd like to speak with the captain, she said. That won't be necessary. I have full authority over cabin operations. I'm not questioning your authority. I'm asking to speak with the captain about a concern. Ma'am, if you don't comply with crew instructions, I'll have you removed from the aircraft. Gerald Hammond, still standing near the galley, crossed his arms and smiled. Other passengers were watching now, some pretending not to, others openly staring. At least 2 people had their phones out. Amara made a decision. She would document this, give the system every opportunity to self-correct, allow each level of authority to reveal whether it would uphold justice or enable discrimination. I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding, Amara said, her voice still calm, almost gentle. I'd like to resolve this appropriately. Can you please document exactly why you're asking me to move? I don't need to document anything. You need to follow crew instructions or face federal consequences. Caroline's voice had risen slightly, projecting to nearby rows. This is your final warning. I'm not refusing to follow instructions on asking for clarification and proper documentation. Surely that's reasonable. A younger flight attendant, J. Torres, appeared behind Caroline. "Is everything okay?" she asked, looking between them. "This passenger is refusing to comply with reseating instructions. I need you to help clear her belongings from the overhead compartment." Jessica Torres hesitated, looking at Amara with uncertainty, then back at Caroline. The hierarchy was clear. She reached for the overhead bin. "Please don't touch my belongings," Amara said quietly. "I will move them myself if and when I receive a legitimate explanation for why I'm being removed from the seat I purchased." Caroline's face flushed. She was not accustomed to resistance, especially resistance delivered with such measured calm. "Fine. If you won't cooperate, I'm calling security." Amara handed it over. The officer examined it, then checked something on her radio. "This comes up as a valid ticket. Business class, purchased 8 days ago." "Nevertheless," Caroline interjected, "I have concerns about how it was obtained, and her refusal to cooperate with my instructions constitutes a violation of federal aviation regulations regarding crew authority." The male officer sighed. "Ma'am," he said to Amara, "the easiest thing would be for you to step off the plane voluntarily. We can sort this out at the gate." "Officer, I have a valid ticket. I've been completely compliant except for asking for a legitimate explanation of why I'm being removed. I'd like to speak with someone from Skybridge Corporate Operations before I voluntarily leave this aircraft." Caroline stepped forward. "Passengers always claim connections when they're caught. This is a standard delaying tactic." She produced a printed document from her pocket, a Skybridge policy manual, and flipped to a marked page. "According to company policy and FAA regulations, flight crew have absolute discretion over passenger removal when safety or operational concerns exist. I have determined that this passenger's behavior constitutes such a concern." The security officers exchanged glances. They didn't want to second-guess flight crew on aviation matters. That was outside their expertise and potentially problematic if something went wrong. "Ma'am," the female officer said to Amara, her tone slightly more sympathetic, "I understand your frustration, but we really do need you to deplane so we can sort this out properly." Amara looked at both officers, looked at Caroline Whitmore's face, which now showed a hint of triumph, looked at Marcus Webb, who was staring at the floor, looked at Jessica Torres, whose expression suggested dawning uncertainty about what she was participating in. A man stood up in row 5. He was black, in his 60s, wearing a suit. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "My name is Michael Brooks. I'm an attorney. I've been watching this entire interaction. What I'm witnessing appears to be clear discrimination." "Sir, please sit down," Caroline said sharply. "This doesn't concern you." "When I witness civil rights violations on a public conveyance, it very much concerns me." Michael Brooks remained standing. "This woman has been nothing but polite and cooperative. She has a valid ticket. The only thing she's asked for is a legitimate explanation. What I've heard instead are baseless accusations and threats." Gerald Hammond, still lurking near the galley, spoke up. "She's just doing her job. Some people think rules don't apply to them." Michael Brooks turned to look at Hammond. "And what's your involvement, sir?" "I'm supposed to be in that seat. I'm a platinum member. I always get upgraded." "But you don't have a confirmed seat assignment for 3A, do you?" Hammond's face reddened. "I have status. I fly every week." "That's not how seat assignments work, and you know it." Brooks turned to the security officers. "I'm formally stating as a witness that what's happening here is discriminatory removal based on racial bias, not on any legitimate operational concern." Caroline's face had gone rigid. "You're interfering with crew operations. I can have you removed as well." "Please try," Brooks said calmly. I'd be happy to discuss this matter in a more public forum." The cabin had gone completely silent now. Every passenger in business class was watching. Multiple phones were recording. The security officers looked increasingly uncomfortable. "This is getting out of hand," the male officer said. "We need the captain." "I am the authority in this cabin. The captain has delegated passenger management to me." As if summoned by the conversation, Captain Raymond Foster emerged from the cockpit. He was in his 50s, gray hair, lined face, the weathered look of someone who'd spent 30 years in aviation. He'd been running through his pre-flight checklist, barely aware of the growing situation in the cabin. Now he stepped into a scene that would define the rest of his career. "What's going on?" he asked, looking around at the crowd of passengers, security officers, his flight attendants. Caroline immediately approached him, positioning herself between Foster and Amara. "Captain, we have a disruptive passenger with questionable ticketing who's refusing crew instructions. I've made the decision to have her removed. We're just waiting for her to deplane voluntarily." Foster looked past Caroline at Amara, who remained seated, laptop closed, hands folded calmly in her lap. She didn't look disruptive. She looked like every other business class passenger. "What's disruptive about her behavior?" Foster asked. "She's refused to move seats when instructed and has been argumentative with crew." "Ma'am," Foster addressed Amara directly, "is that accurate?" Amara's voice was steady. "Captain, I have a valid business class ticket for seat 3A. Ms. Whitmore asked me to move to economy to give my seat to that gentleman," she gestured toward Hammond, "without providing any legitimate reason. When I asked for an explanation and offered to speak with you directly, she called security and accused me of using a fraudulent ticket, which is false. I've asked repeatedly for proper documentation of why I'm being removed. That's the extent of my disruption." Foster looked at Caroline. "Did you check her ticket?" "Yes, but these tickets can be obtained through various means that—" "Did it scan properly? Is it valid in the system?" "Technically, yes, but—" "Then what's the problem?" "Captain, I've been doing this for 15 years. I can tell when something isn't right. We have a platinum member who needs this seat, and given the circumstances, I made a judgment call based on my experience and authority." Foster felt something prickle at the back of his neck. He'd trusted Caroline's judgment on dozens of flights. She was efficient, knowledgeable, respected by much of the crew. But standing here, looking at the scene before him, the calm black woman, the agitated white man, the watching crowd, the recording phones, he suddenly saw what he'd been missing. "Ms. Whitmore, step into the galley with me, now." They walked to the front galley area. Foster kept his voice low but firm. "Caroline, tell me exactly what happened, from the beginning." She recounted the story from her perspective. Hammond's request for an upgrade, the full business class cabin, her decision to accommodate a loyal frequent flyer, the passenger's refusal to cooperate, her escalating resistance. Did she raise her voice? No, but did she threaten anyone? Not explicitly, but her attitude. Did she use profanity or insulting language? No, but Captain, you have to understand the tone, the implication. "What I understand," Foster said, his voice hardening, "is that you've created a situation that's delayed my flight, involved security, and is currently being recorded by multiple passengers over a seat dispute that appears to have no legitimate operational basis. I have the authority to manage passenger seating. You have the authority to ensure safety and handle legitimate operational issues. You don't have the authority to arbitrarily remove passengers who've done nothing wrong." Caroline's face went pale, then flushed. "Captain, with all due respect, I've been doing this for 15 years. I know what I'm doing." It was the wrong thing to say. Foster was a captain for 12 years, but he'd been flying for 30. And he'd never, in 3 decades, had a passenger situation escalate to this level over a simple seat dispute. "Go back to the cabin, tell security there's been a misunderstanding, and they can leave." Miss Chen keeps her seat. Mr. Hammond stays in economy, and when we land, you and I are going to have a very long conversation with our operations manager." Caroline opened her mouth to protest, then thought better of it. She walked back into the cabin, her posture rigid with barely suppressed anger. Foster followed. He approached Amara's seat. "Dr. Chen, I apologize for this situation. You're cleared to remain in your assigned seat. We'll be departing shortly." Amara nodded. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate you addressing this." As Foster turned to leave, Amara spoke again, her voice just loud enough for him to hear. "Captain, before you return to the cockpit, I'd like to give you something." She reached into her laptop bag and removed a business card, extended it to him. Foster took it, read it. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock, dawning horror. The card read, "Dr. Amara Chen, founder and CEO, Horizon Global Aviation." Below that, a phone number and email address. Foster looked at Amara, looked at the card, looked back at Amara. "This aircraft," Amara said quietly, "registration number N847HG, is owned by my company. It's leased to Skybridge under a contract that includes specific operational standards and conduct provisions. I'd prefer to handle what just happened quietly and internally, but I need you to understand the situation fully before you make any further decisions." Foster's mouth had gone dry. In his 30 years of flying, in 12 years as a captain, he had never experienced anything close to this moment. Caroline, who had been standing near the galley directing the security officers to leave, hadn't heard the exchange. She was too far away, too focused on managing her own embarrassment. Foster walked quickly to the cockpit, closed the door, picked up the radio to contact Skybridge Operations. "Operations, this is SB 2847. I need to speak with Diane Russo immediately. It's urgent." "Captain Foster, Miss Russo is in meetings. I can have her call you back." "Tell her that Dr. Amara Chen from Horizon Global Aviation is on my aircraft, and there's been an incident. Tell her I need her on the line in the next 60 seconds, or I'm not departing this gate." There was a pause. Then, "Stand by." 40 seconds later, Diane Russo's voice came through. "Captain Foster, what's happening?" Foster explained everything: the seat dispute, Caroline's accusations, the security involvement, his initial decision to support his crew member, and finally, the business card. The silence on the other end lasted 5 seconds. It felt like an hour. "Jesus Christ," Russo whispered. Then louder, "Is Dr. Chen still on the aircraft?" "Yes." "Don't let her leave. I'm coming to the gate personally. Don't depart, don't do anything. Just, Christ, keep her comfortable. Apologize profusely. I'll be there in 10 minutes. "What about Caroline Whitmore?" "Remove her from the flight immediately. I'll handle the rest." Foster returned to the cabin. Every eye tracked him. Amara sat calmly, her laptop open again, apparently reading email. "Miss Whitmore," Foster said, his voice carrying through the cabin, "you're being removed from this flight. Please gather your belongings and deplane immediately." Caroline's face went white. "Captain, what?" "Now, Caroline." She looked around wildly, as if searching for support, found none. Jessica Torres was staring at her with wide eyes. Marcus Webb had disappeared back into the cockpit. The passengers watched with expressions ranging from satisfaction to sympathy to uncomfortable fascination. Gerald Hammond, realizing the situation had somehow reversed catastrophically, tried to quietly slip toward his economy seat. "Mr. Hammond," Foster added, his voice hard, "you'll be staying in your originally assigned seat in economy. If I hear of any further issues from you during this flight, you'll be meeting with airport police upon landing." Hammond's face purpled, but he said nothing. He grabbed his bag and retreated toward the back of the plane. Caroline moved like someone in a dream. She collected her bag from the crew area, walked past Amara without looking at her, and exited the aircraft. The cabin remained silent. Foster addressed the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay and the disruption. We'll be departing shortly. Thank you for your patience." He returned to the galley where Jessica Torres stood frozen. "Miss Torres," he said quietly, "you're going to continue on this flight, but when we land, you're going to write a complete report of everything you saw and everything you did. Understood?" "Yes, sir," she whispered. "And Jessica," his voice softened slightly, "you're young, you're still learning. Learn from this. Really learn from it." She nodded, tears in her eyes. Diane Russo arrived at the gate in 8 minutes. She was a tall woman with short gray hair, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. She walked onto the aircraft with the controlled urgency of someone managing a crisis. She approached Amara's seat directly. "Dr. Chen, I cannot adequately express how deeply sorry I am for what happened. This is absolutely unacceptable and does not represent our company's values or standards." Amara looked up from her laptop. "Miss Russo, I appreciate your response, but I'm less interested in apologies than I am in understanding how a situation like this was able to occur and how your company intends to ensure it never happens again." "We're launching an immediate investigation. Miss Whitmore has been suspended pending review." "She should be terminated," Amara said, her voice still calm but carrying steel underneath. "And this isn't about one employee, it's about systems. I've reviewed Miss Whitmore's file, 17 complaints in 5 years, 12 involving passengers of color, all dismissed by your HR department. That's not an individual problem, that's institutional failure." Russo's face tightened. "I wasn't aware of the specific numbers. Then you should be. That's your job." Amara paused. "Miss Russo, my company leases 12 aircraft to Skybridge, representing approximately $2.4 billion in assets. Those lease agreements include conduct and operational standards clauses. What happened today potentially violates at least 6 provisions of our contract." The blood drained from Russo's face. "I haven't decided yet whether to invoke those clauses. That decision will depend on how your company handles this situation, not just the immediate aftermath, but the systemic changes you implement. I'll need to see comprehensive reforms, transparent reporting, and genuine accountability, not a PR response, actual structural change." "You'll have it, whatever it takes. I'm going to hold you to that. My legal team will be in touch tomorrow to discuss specifics." Russo nodded. "Again, Miss Chen, I am profoundly sorry. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to the 16 other passengers who complained about Miss Whitmore and were ignored. Apologize to every person of color who's been made to feel they don't belong in spaces they have every right to occupy. Then fix your systems so those apologies mean something." Russo left the aircraft. Foster announced they were cleared for departure. The door closed. The engines spooled up. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Michael Brooks leaned across the aisle. "Dr. Chen, I'm genuinely impressed by how you handled that. With your permission, I'd like to speak with you during the flight about representing some of those other passengers who were dismissed." Amara smiled slightly. "I think that's an excellent idea, Mr. Brooks." The aircraft taxied toward the runway. Inside the cabin, the normal sounds of flight preparation resumed, overhead bins being checked, seatbelts clicking, flight attendants running through safety demonstrations. But underneath the routine, everyone knew they'd witnessed something that would ripple far beyond this single flight. In the cockpit, Captain Foster ran through his final checks with mechanical precision, his mind elsewhere. He had trusted his crew member's judgment. He was seconds away from removing an innocent passenger. He had been complicit in exactly the kind of discriminatory behavior he thought he'd never tolerate. The weight of that realization pressed on him as the aircraft climbed 10,000 feet. In the galley, Jessica Torres prepared meal service with shaking hands. She kept seeing Caroline's face, the mentor she admired, the professional she had tried to emulate. Kept hearing Caroline's voice during their training sessions. You have to be firm with passengers. They'll try to take advantage if they think you're weak. Trust your instincts. Don't let them intimidate you. She'd been learning the wrong lessons. In seat 3A, Amara returned to her maintenance reports. The aircraft was performing normally, oil pressure steady, hydraulics nominal, all systems functioning as designed. The human systems had failed catastrophically, but those, at least. He sat in the empty seat beside her, Gerald Hammond's original seat, ironically. I've been practicing civil rights law for 30 years. I've seen every variation of discrimination you can imagine, but I rarely see it handled the way you handled it today. I gave the system every opportunity to self-correct, Amara said. That's important, both legally and morally. You don't invoke power unnecessarily. You let each level of authority demonstrate whether it will uphold justice or enable injustice. And document everything. And document everything, she agreed, though in this case 8 passengers did that for me. Brooks smiled. Those videos are going to be everywhere by the time we land. Probably. How do you feel about that? Amara considered the question. Conflicted. I don't want to be a symbol or a viral story, but visibility creates accountability. If those videos lead to actual systemic change, then the discomfort is worth it. Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. Why didn't you tell Ms. Whitmore who you were immediately? You could have ended that situation in seconds. Amara was quiet for a moment. Because I wanted to see if the system would work without my authority forcing it. I wanted to know if Captain Foster would do the right thing because it was right, not because I could fire him. I wanted to see if those security officers would question discriminatory treatment of a passenger they thought was powerless. And the system failed at every level. The flight attendant, the crew, security, even the captain initially. It took the threat of significant consequences to force accountability. That tells me the problem isn't individual bad actors, it's institutional structures that protect the wrong people and penalize those who speak up. Brooks nodded slowly. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. There are 16 other passengers, that I know of, who've complained about Ms. Whitmore. Their complaints were dismissed, buried, ignored. Some of them faced retaliation. They deserve justice too. I agree. Would you be willing to support a class action suit? Not necessarily as a plaintiff, you have your own leverage, but as someone who can validate their experiences, provide documentation, maybe push for broader reforms? Yes, Amara said without hesitation. Send me the details. I'll have my legal team review everything. Thank you. Brooks stood. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing, demanding systematic change rather than just individual punishment, that's the right approach. It's harder, it takes longer, but it actually fixes things. After he left, Amara stared out the window at the dark Atlantic below. Moonlight on water, the aircraft's navigation lights blinking against the void. She'd built her career on seeing systems clearly, on understanding how components interacted, where stress points emerged, how failures cascaded. Aviation systems were complex but ultimately logical. Human systems were messier, more resistant to change. But they could change. They just needed the right pressure applied at the right points. She opened her laptop and began drafting an email to her legal team. The aircraft landed at Heathrow 8 hours after departing JFK. As passengers deplaned, several approached Amara to express support or offer to serve as witnesses. She thanked each of them, took contact information from those who offered it, and remained gracious throughout. Captain Foster stood at the exit, as he always did, thanking passengers for flying Skybridge. When Amara approached, he straightened. "Dr. Chen, I'd like to apologize again, not just for the incident, but for my initial response. I should have investigated more thoroughly before supporting Ms. Whitmore's decision." "Captain, I appreciate that, but understand, this isn't about you personally. This is about systems that allowed 17 complaints to be dismissed, systems that protect senior employees over passengers, systems that enable discrimination while claiming to prevent it. I know, and I want to help fix those systems. I've already requested a meeting with our operations leadership. I'll be recommending comprehensive changes to how we handle passenger complaints and crew accountability." "Good, because if I hear that you witnessed something like this again and said nothing, our conversation will be very different." Foster nodded. "Understood. And Dr. Chen, thank you for handling this the way you did. A lot of people in your position would have destroyed everyone in reach. You're building something better." Amara walked through Heathrow's corridors, processed through immigration, collected her luggage. Her phone had been flooded with messages during the flight, her team, her family, news outlets, legal contacts. The videos had indeed gone viral. "Black woman ordered off her own plane" was trending. Major outlets were picking up the story. She responded to the most urgent messages, ignored the media requests, and called her brother. James Chen answered on the first ring. "I've been watching this unfold for the past 8 hours. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Tired, annoyed, but fine." "The internet is losing its mind, and Skybridge's board is apparently in emergency session." "Good. They should be." "Amara, do you want to pursue this legally? Because we have about 17 different causes of action. We could absolutely destroy them." "I don't want to destroy them. I want to fix them. There's a difference." "You could do both." "No, because destruction is temporary satisfaction. It doesn't change anything long term. Other airlines would just get better at hiding the same problems. I want actual structural reform." "You're a better person than me." "No, I'm just thinking strategically. We have leverage right now. Public pressure, contract terms, media attention. We use that leverage to force genuine change. If we just sue for damages, they write a check and nothing improves." "All right, I'll draft a comprehensive reform proposal to present to Skybridge. But Amara, we're also going to include very specific penalties if they backslide." "Absolutely." She ended the call and climbed into the taxi queue. The next 3 weeks were intense. Skybridge terminated Caroline Whitmore for cause. The union declined to defend her, recognizing that the video evidence and her pattern of complaints made her position indefensible. She issued a public statement claiming she'd been railroaded by political correctness and abandoned by the company she'd served for 15 years. The statement generated more backlash than sympathy. Donald Reeves, the HR director who dismissed 12 complaints against Whitmore, was also terminated. An internal audit revealed he'd systematically dismissed complaints involving senior employees to avoid creating discoverable patterns that could support discrimination lawsuits. His approach had protected the company's legal exposure in the short term while enabling ongoing discrimination. Marcus Webb received a formal reprimand and was required to complete intensive training on intervention and reporting requirements. His career progression stalled. He would spend the next 5 years trying to rebuild his reputation. Diane Russo proved firm to her word. Skybridge implemented sweeping reforms. All passenger complaints now went to an independent review board, not internal HR. Crew members with multiple complaints underwent mandatory review, regardless of seniority or union protection. Third-party auditors conducted quarterly assessments of discrimination and bias in customer service. De-escalation training became mandatory for all crew members, with particular focus on recognizing implicit bias. A passenger advocate office was established with direct reporting to the CEO. Complaint data was made public in anonymized, aggregated form to enable external accountability. Most significantly, Horizon Global's lease agreements became the industry template. Other aviation companies began including similar conduct and accountability provisions, effectively making passenger treatment a contractual obligation backed by major financial penalties. The FAA issued new guidance on crew authority and passenger removal, clarifying that crew discretion must be based on legitimate safety concerns, not subjective judgments about passenger appearance or behavior. Michael Brooks's class action on behalf of the other 16 complainants settled for $4.8 million and a formal public apology from Skybridge. More importantly, all 16 plaintiffs received personal letters from CEO Robert Galloway acknowledging the harm done and detailing the reforms implemented because of their courage in coming forward. 3 months after the incident, Amara received a handwritten letter. The return address was Jessica Torres. She opened it. "Dear Dr. Chen, I've been trying to write this letter for weeks. I kept starting and deleting it because nothing felt adequate. I watched the video of myself blocking your aisle, standing beside Caroline, participating in your humiliation. I didn't recognize the person I saw. Or maybe I did recognize her, and that's worse. I thought professionalism meant loyalty to authority. I thought being good at my job meant supporting senior crew members without question. I thought passengers who pushed back were problems to be managed. I was wrong about everything. What kills me is that I was so proud of myself. I thought I was being professional, strong, effective. I was actually being cruel. I've spent the past 3 months in therapy and in extensive retraining. I've read books about implicit bias, institutional racism, power dynamics. I've talked to other flight attendants of color about their experiences. I've started seeing how many small moments of discrimination I participated in without even noticing. It's easy to think you're not racist because you don't use slurs or consciously hate anyone, but I was absolutely participating in racist systems. I was assuming things about passengers based on appearance. I was treating different passengers with different levels of suspicion and respect. I was doing all of it while telling myself I was just doing my job. You could have destroyed my career. You had every right to. Instead, you gave me a chance to learn and change. I'm never going to forget standing in that aisle, feeling so certain I was right. And I'm never going to forget watching you maintain your dignity while I participated in taking it away. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make up for what I did, but I'm going to spend my career trying, really trying. Thank you for not giving up on me when I gave you every reason to. With profound gratitude and regret, Jessica Torres." Amara read the letter twice, then she drafted a response. "Jessica, I received your letter. Thank you for your honesty. The system failed us both. You were trained wrong. You were taught that loyalty to authority was professionalism, when sometimes the most professional thing you can do is question authority that's being misused. You asked if you'll ever make up for what you did. The answer is that you already started making up for it the moment you recognized what you did wrong. Most people never reach that point. They rationalize, deflect, blame others. What you did was experience the discomfort of recognition. You sat with it instead of running from it. That's harder than most people realize. What matters now is what you do with that recognition. Every time you intervene when you see a colleague treating a passenger with bias, every time you speak up when someone makes an assumption based on appearance, every time you choose active justice over passive complicity, those moments will define whether you actually learned something or just felt temporarily bad. The fact that you're trying, genuinely trying, means more than you know. With respect, Amara. She sealed the letter and sent it. 6 months after the incident, Amara received an invitation to speak at an aviation industry conference about operational standards and accountability. She accepted. The conference was in Chicago. The audience was primarily airline executives, operations managers, and industry regulators. Amara stood at the podium in a room of 500 people and spoke for 30 minutes. She didn't talk about the incident directly. Instead, she discussed systems theory, feedback loops, institutional incentives, and the measurable costs of poor accountability structures. She presented data showing that airlines with robust complaint handling systems had lower legal costs, higher customer satisfaction, and better employee retention. She demonstrated how transparent accountability actually protected companies from liability rather than increasing it. She argued that discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was operationally inefficient, legally risky, and financially expensive. She made the case for justice in the language of business. The room was silent when she finished. During the Q&A, a senior executive from a competing airline raised his hand. Dr. Chen, everyone in this room knows what happened on Flight 2847. My question is simple. Why didn't you just destroy Skybridge? You had the leverage. You had public support. You could have pulled your entire fleet and bankrupted them. Amara looked at him steadily. Because destruction isn't the same as accountability. I could have destroyed Skybridge and felt satisfied for a few weeks, but the underlying problems would have persisted across the industry. Other airlines would have learned to hide complaints better, not handle them better. Instead, we used leverage to force structural change. Now Skybridge is a case study. Other airlines are implementing similar reforms, not because they're altruistic, but because the alternative is expensive and publicly embarrassing. That's how you actually fix systems. You don't destroy the pieces, you rebuild the structure so the same failures can't happen again. The executive nodded slowly. And if they backslide? Then we use the contract provisions we negotiated. But we gave them every opportunity to get it right. That's important. You can't claim ignorance or inability when you've been given resources, time, and explicit requirements. Another hand went up, a woman in her 40s. Dr. Chen, what advice would you give to passengers who face discrimination but don't have your resources or authority? Document everything. Film it if you safely can. Complain formally, in writing, with dates and details. Find witnesses. Connect with advocacy organizations. Use social media strategically. Public pressure creates accountability when internal systems fail. But more importantly, we need to build systems so that passengers don't have to have resources or authority to be treated with basic dignity. That's what accountability structures are for. No one should need to own the aircraft to be treated fairly. The applause was sustained. After the conference, several executives approached Amara privately. 3 airlines requested consultations on updating their complaint handling procedures. 2 wanted to discuss adopting similar lease provisions in their contracts. The ripples continued spreading. Amara returned to her normal life. She continued traveling frequently, inspecting her aircraft, assessing operations. She maintained direct knowledge of her assets and the systems managing them. 8 months after the incident, Amara boarded a Skybridge flight from San Francisco to Tokyo. Different route, different aircraft, though still one she owned. As she approached the boarding door, the senior flight attendant greeted her professionally. The woman was black, in her 50s, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Welcome, Dr. Chen," she said. Amara smiled back. "Thank you." As she moved into the cabin, the flight attendant caught her eye and gave a barely perceptible nod. Recognition, respect, solidarity. Amara returned the nod and continued to her seat. The cabin filled, the usual sounds of departure, bags stowed, seatbelts clicked, safety demonstrations delivered. The aircraft pushed back on schedule, the engines spooled up, the nose lifted off the runway. Amara opened her laptop and reviewed maintenance logs for the 777 she was flying on. Everything was nominal. The aircraft was performing exactly as designed. Below her, San Francisco fell away. The Golden Gate Bridge passed beneath the wing. The Pacific stretched endlessly ahead. She closed the maintenance file and opened a different document, a draft proposal for industry-wide accountability standards she was developing with Michael Brooks and a coalition of civil rights organizations. The work wasn't finished. It would never really be finished. Systems required constant maintenance, constant attention, constant willingness to identify and repair failures. But the work was progressing, and that was enough. The aircraft climbed through 30,000 feet. The cabin lights dimmed for the long Pacific crossing. Around her, passengers settled into their own rhythms, reading, working, sleeping. Amara glanced out the window one more time, saw her reflection in the darkened glass.